The morning I arrived in Lancaster County, the air smelled like rain and fresh-cut hay. I remember thinking it felt like stepping into another century. Horse-drawn buggies clip-clopping down narrow roads. Farmhouses with no power lines. Laundry billowing on clotheslines like ship sails. For someone who'd spent the last 4 years in Boston, surrounded by concrete, deadlines, and the constant digital hum of graduate school, the silence was almost unsettling. "Just up ahead," Professor Michaels said, tapping the steering wheel of his Subaru. "The Yoders have been farming this land for 5 generations. They're old order Amish, but they've agreed to let you stay as part of our agricultural heritage documentation project." I nodded, watching the landscape unfold. 3 months of quiet after the chaos of my thesis defense. 3 months to breathe, to document traditional farming methods, to collect photographs that wouldn't end up in some academic journal nobody read. I needed this distance from everything, from the city, from Daniel, and the wreckage of what we'd been. "They know I'm gay, right?" I asked suddenly, the thought striking me with unexpected urgency. Professor Michaels glanced at me. "I didn't specify. It's not relevant to your work here, Thomas." I swallowed hard. "I just don't want any complications. The Amish aren't as concerned with outsiders' lives as you might think. You're here to work, document, and learn. As long as you respect their ways, they'll respect your privacy." The dirt road curved sharply, revealing a white farmhouse nestled against rolling green hills. A massive red barn stood sentinel nearby, weathered wood glowing in the morning light. 2 men waited by a wooden fence. One older with a full beard, the other middle-aged with a straw hat pulled low. "That's Eli Yoder and his son-in-law, Abram Miller," Professor Michaels said. "Eli's the patriarch. His wife Sarah runs the household with their daughters. They have 4 sons, too. The youngest still lives at home. He's about your age, I think." I nodded, suddenly nervous. What had seemed like a perfect escape now felt like a strange new world with rules I didn't understand. The car rolled to a stop, and I stepped out into the thick summer air. "Mr. Yoder," Professor Michaels called, extending his hand. "Thank you for agreeing to host Thomas." Eli Yoder's handshake was firm, calloused from decades of labor. His eyes, pale blue under bushy brows, studied me carefully. "Welcome," he said simply. "You'll work hard here." "Yes, sir," I replied. "I'm grateful for the opportunity." "Isaac will show you where to sleep," he continued, gesturing toward the house. "You'll take meals with us. We rise at 4:30. Work starts at 5. I tried not to look stunned. My earliest class in Boston had been at 10, and I'd still considered it cruel and unusual punishment. "Thomas brought his camera equipment," Professor Michaels explained, "for the documentation project we discussed." Eli nodded. "No photographs of faces," he reminded us, "and none on the Sabbath." "I understand," I said. As Professor Michaels prepared to leave, panic fluttered in my chest. The realization of what I'd committed to, 3 months in a world utterly foreign to me, suddenly felt overwhelming. But before I could voice second thoughts, the screen door of the farmhouse creaked open. That was the first time I saw him. He stood silhouetted in the doorway, tall and lean, wearing the traditional Amish clothing. Blue shirt, black pants held up by suspenders, a straw hat similar to his father's, but newer. As he stepped into the sunlight, I noticed his hair was the color of wheat, his skin tanned from outdoor work. "This is my youngest, Isaac," Eli said. "He'll show you around." Isaac nodded without meeting my gaze. "Hello," he said, voice so quiet I almost missed it. "Isaac, take Thomas to the Dottie house, and then show him the property." "Yes, Father." Professor Michaels left with promises to check in next week, and then I was alone, my suitcase and camera equipment at my feet, standing before a boy who wouldn't look at me. "The Dottie house is this way," Isaac said, picking up my heaviest bag with surprising ease. "It's where my grandparents lived before they passed. It's small, but it has a bed." I followed him around the main house to a modest structure about 50 yards away, a one-room cottage with a small porch. The interior was sparse but clean, a single bed with a handmade quilt, a wooden chair, a table with an oil lamp, a basin for washing. No electricity, as expected. No mirror. No distractions. The outhouse is behind the barn, Isaac explained, still looking somewhere past my shoulder. We bathe on Wednesdays and Saturdays. Mother will heat water for you. I set down my camera bag. Thank you. This is perfect. He nodded, shifting his weight from one foot to another. In the small space of the Dottie house, I became acutely aware of how tall he was, maybe an inch or two taller than my 6 feet. His hands were large, fingers long and elegant despite the calluses. I should show you the rest before supper, he said. The tour was brief and efficient. The barn with its sweet hay smell and patient horses. The workshop where furniture was made during winter months. The vast vegetable garden where 2 young women in identical blue dresses and white caps worked between rows of corn. They glanced up as we passed, curious but reserved. Isaac's sisters, I presumed, though he didn't introduce us. The entire time, Isaac maintained a careful distance, speaking only when necessary, his words clipped and practical. Yet twice, once by the chicken coop and again near the apple orchard. I caught him watching me. Not my face, but my hands as I gestured, my shoulders as I turned. Each time our eyes might have met, he looked away. That first evening set the pattern for days to come. Dinner was taken at a long wooden table, silent except for prayers in German and occasional practical conversation. I sat between Isaac's older brother Samuel and his brother-in-law Abram, while Isaac sat directly across from me, eyes fixed on his plate. The food was simple but abundant. Roast chicken, potatoes, green beans from the garden, fresh bread with homemade butter. Later, alone in the Dottie house with only the oil lamp for company, I unpacked my meager belongings and wondered what I'd gotten myself into. The disconnection was absolute. No electricity meant no charging my phone, which I'd left in the car anyway. No internet, no distractions from the thoughts I'd been running from all year. Sleep came fitfully that first night, broken by unfamiliar sounds, an owl hooting nearby, the distant nickering of horses, the creak of the old building settling. I dreamed of Daniel, of shouted accusations in our Cambridge apartment, of boxes packed and doors slammed. I woke to darkness so complete it felt like blindness. Then a rooster crowed, impossibly loud in the pre-dawn stillness, and my first full day on the Yoder farm began. The work was brutal. I'd known it would be physical, but knowing and experiencing were vastly different things. By noon of that first day, my hands were blistered, my back screaming in protest. We'd been in the field since sunrise, the men of the family and I, working in a synchronized rhythm I struggled to match. "City hands," Samuel commented when he saw me wincing, not unkindly. "They'll toughen up." Isaac worked nearby, methodically and without complaint. Occasionally, he'd glance in my direction, expression unreadable. Once, when I stumbled over an uneven patch of earth, his hand shot out to steady me. Strong fingers gripping my forearm for just a moment before withdrawing as if burned. "Sorry," I murmured. "It's nothing," he replied, and moved away. By the end of the first week, I'd established a tentative routine. Rise before dawn, cold water splashed on my face from the basin. Join the family for a breakfast of eggs, porridge, and strong black coffee. Work until noon, a brief lunch. More work until dusk, dinner. Then, blissful solitude in the Dottie house, where I'd write field notes by lamplight until exhaustion claimed me. The isolation was both blessing and curse. Without the constant digital noise of my regular life, my thoughts seemed louder, more insistent. I thought of Daniel often, of the relationship that had consumed 4 years of my life before imploding spectacularly. I thought of my parents' disappointed faces when I'd announced I was pursuing photography instead of law school. I thought of friends scattered across the country, living lives that continued without me. But most often, I found myself thinking of Isaac. He was an enigma. Among his family, he was nearly silent, speaking only when spoken to. He worked diligently, but seemed separate somehow, as if occupying a slightly different reality. I noticed how his father's gaze followed him with something like confusion. How his brothers exchanged glances when Isaac declined to join their conversations. Yet he wasn't sullen or angry, just elsewhere. Watching. thinking thoughts I couldn't begin to guess. On the 8th day, something shifted. I was in the vegetable garden with my camera, photographing the intricate pattern of beans climbing their poles. No people in frame, respecting the family's beliefs. The afternoon light was perfect, golden and warm, making every dewdrop and leaf vein stand out in sharp relief. "What do you see?" I startled at Isaac's voice behind me. I hadn't heard him approach. "Patterns," I answered honestly, lowering the camera. "The way the plants grow toward the light. The geometry of it." He moved to stand beside me, closer than he'd ever willingly been. "May I?" he asked, gesturing to the camera. Surprised, I nodded and handed it to him. Our fingers brushed in the exchange, and I noticed how he didn't flinch away this time. Isaac held the camera carefully, turning it over in his hands before raising it to his eye as he'd seen me do. He didn't press the shutter, just looked through the viewfinder for a long moment. "It's different," he finally said, returning the camera. "Seeing things this way." "How so?" He considered the question with the same careful attention he seemed to give everything. "Smaller," he finally said. "But also more." Something about the way he said it, like he was discovering a truth he'd always suspected, made me smile. "That's exactly right." For the first time, Isaac met my gaze directly. His eyes were a startling blue-green, like shallow ocean water. Something passed between us in that moment, a recognition perhaps. Then he looked away, back toward the house. "Mother made lemonade," he said. "It's on the porch." We walked together in silence. The lemonade was tart and sweet, served in glass mason jars beaded with condensation. We sat on the porch steps, not speaking, watching swallows dive over the fields. When Isaac passed me the pitcher for a second glass, our fingers touched again. This time, the contact lingered for the space of 2 heartbeats before he withdrew. That night, I saw him standing by the barn as dusk settled over the farm. The setting sun caught in his hair, turning it to burnished gold. He was looking toward the Dottie house, toward me, with an expression I couldn't decipher at that distance. When he realized I'd spotted him, he didn't look away immediately. Instead, he raised his hand in a small gesture that might have been a wave, might have been something else entirely. I waved back. The days began to blur together, marked by subtle shifts rather than distinct events. Isaac started appearing wherever I was working, not helping, not hindering, just present. He'd ask occasional questions about my life in Boston, about the university, about the world beyond Lancaster County. His curiosity was cautious but unmistakable. "Have you been to the ocean?" he asked one afternoon as we repaired a section of fence. "Yes, many times. I grew up in Rhode Island, right on the coast." "What does it sound like?" The question caught me off guard with its simplicity and depth. "It sounds like breathing," I said after a moment. "Like the world breathing, constant, but never exactly the same twice." Isaac nodded as if this made perfect sense. "I've seen pictures," he said. "But pictures don't have sounds." "Or smells," I added. "The ocean smells like salt and life and decay all at once." "Will you go back there, after this?" The question seemed to cost him something. Probably not to Rhode Island. But yes, I'll likely end up near water again. He hammered a nail with more force than necessary. "I've never been further than the next county." I wanted to say something comforting, but any response felt hollow against the reality of our different paths. Instead, I held the post steady while he secured it, our hands separated by mere inches of weathered wood. That evening at dinner, I noticed Eli watching his youngest son with a furrowed brow. Isaac was unusually animated, asking me about the photographs I'd taken that day. His mother Sarah glanced between them, her expression carefully neutral. "Thomas needs to focus on his work," Eli finally said. "He's not here to entertain Isaac." Isaac immediately fell silent, eyes lowered. "Yes, father." The meal continued with only the sound of utensils against plates. When it was over, Isaac disappeared without a word. I found him later in the barn, brushing down the horses with long, methodical strokes. I stood in the doorway, uncertain of my welcome. "I'm sorry about dinner," I said, when he finally acknowledged my presence. "It's not your fault." His voice was flat. Father is right. I ask too many questions. I don't mind your questions. He continued brushing, his back to me. Why did you come here, Thomas? Really? The directness surprised me. I needed space from my life there. Were you running from something? I leaned against a wooden post, watching his rhythmic movements. Someone, I admitted, a relationship that ended badly. Isaac's hand stilled for a moment before resuming their work. A woman? My heart beat faster. This was the moment when I usually decided how honest to be, how much of myself to risk revealing. In Boston, it was simple. Here, in this world so different from my own, the calculation was more complex. No, I said finally. A man named Daniel. The brush stopped completely. Isaac stood motionless, his back still to me. The silence stretched between us, heavy with implications. I prepared myself for disgust, for rejection, for the conversation to end. Instead, Isaac turned slowly to face me. His expression wasn't revulsion, but something more complicated. Confusion mixed with what might have been relief. You can do that? He asked, voice barely audible over the soft nickering of the horses. Men can be together like that? The innocence of the question broke my heart a little. Yes, I said gently. In the world I come from, men can love other men. Women can love women. It's not always easy, but it's not forbidden. Isaac's eyes were wide, searching my face as if looking for a lie or a trick. Finding neither, he swallowed hard and turned back to the horse. I should finish here, he said, voice rough. It's getting late. I recognized dismissal when I heard it. Good night, Isaac. As I walked back to the Dottie house under a canopy of stars, I wondered if I'd just made a terrible mistake. If the tentative connection we'd been building was now severed. If tomorrow I'd find myself isolated again among the Yoders. Sleep was impossible that night. I lay awake, replaying Isaac's question in my mind. You can do that? The astonishment in his voice, the revelation that had seemed to move through him like a physical current. Dawn was breaking when I finally drifted off, gray light seeping through the cabin's single window. I dreamed of Isaac, standing at the ocean's edge, waves lapping at his bare feet, his face turned toward an endless horizon. I didn't see Isaac at all the next day. Eli informed me at breakfast that his son had gone to a neighboring farm to help with repairs after a storm. The day stretched endlessly without his quiet presence nearby. I took photographs of empty fields, of tools arranged just so, of shadows falling across the barn floor. None of them seemed right. That evening, dark clouds gathered on the horizon. The air grew thick and electric, promising a summer storm. I sat on the porch of the Dottie house, watching lightning flicker in the distance, counting the seconds until thunder followed. Movement caught my eye, a figure crossing from the main house toward the barn. Even in the dimming light, I recognized Isaac's tall frame. Without allowing myself to think too much about it, I stood and followed. The barn was quiet, except for the occasional shuffle of horses in their stalls. Isaac stood by a ladder leading to the hayloft, head tilted, as if listening to the approaching storm. Isaac, I said softly. He turned, unsurprised, as if he'd been waiting. Thomas, I didn't see you today. Father sent me to the Millers. He gestured vaguely eastward. Their roof was damaged. I nodded, unsure what to say next. The air between us felt charged, like the atmosphere before lightning strikes. A thunderclap shook the barn. One of the horses whinnied nervously. Storm's getting closer, Isaac murmured. You should go back. Instead, I took a step toward him. Are you angry about what I told you? He shook his head slowly. Not angry. His eyes met mine, then drifted away. Confused, maybe. Another crack of thunder, closer now. Rain began to patter against the roof. We should check the hayloft windows, Isaac said suddenly. Make sure they're closed. He started up the wooden ladder, and after a moment's hesitation, I followed. The hayloft was warm and sweet-smelling, illuminated only by what little daylight remained and occasional flashes of lightning. Isaac moved to a small window at the far end, securing its latch. "There was a storm like this last summer," he said, his back to me. "Damaged half the roof. We spent weeks rebuilding." Rain was coming down harder now, drumming against the barn. The sound was oddly soothing, cocooning us in a world apart. "I've been thinking about what you said," Isaac continued, still not looking at me. "About men. Being with men." My throat felt dry suddenly. "What about it?" He turned then, his face half-shadowed. "Have you known, always, that you were that way?" "I think I always knew I was different," I answered carefully. "But I didn't have words for it until I was a teenager." Isaac nodded, absorbing this. A flash of lightning illuminated his face, earnest, troubled, seeking. He took a halting step toward me. "Do you ever feel something strange when you look at someone?" he asked, voice barely audible above the storm. My heart hammered against my ribs. "Strange how?" "Like," he struggled for words, "like everything is too bright suddenly, like you can't breathe right, like you want to be closer, but you're scared of what happens if you are." "Yes," I whispered. "I know exactly what that feels like." We stood facing each other in the half-dark, hay dust swirling in the humid air between us. Outside, the storm raged, rain lashing against the barn. Inside, a different kind of storm was building. "Isaac," I began, not sure what I was going to say. He moved closer, close enough that I could see his chest rising and falling with rapid breaths. His hand lifted, trembling visibly, and hovered near my face. "Show me," he whispered, raw vulnerability in every syllable. My mind raced with all the reasons I should step back. He was younger, sheltered. I was leaving at summer's end. This could only lead to pain for us both. But as his fingertips finally, tentatively made contact with my jaw, feather-light and shaking, all those reasons seemed to dissolve. The touch was so innocent, so filled with wonder, that it broke something open inside me. I reached up slowly, giving him every chance to pull away, and covered his hand with mine, pressing his palm more firmly against my cheek. His pupils dilated, breath catching audibly. Time suspended between one heartbeat and the next. Lightning flashed again, throwing his face into sharp relief, eyes wide, lips parted. In them, I saw fear and hope and longing so intense it was almost painful to witness. "Isaac," I whispered again, my free hand moving to rest lightly on his waist. "Are you sure about this?" He swallowed hard, conflict visible on his face. This was everything he'd been taught to reject, everything his community condemned. Yet he didn't move away. "I don't know what I'm doing," he confessed, voice breaking. "I just know I can't stop thinking about you, about this." The simple honesty undid me. This wasn't a game or a casual encounter. For Isaac, this was revelation and rebellion all at once, a door opening to a world he'd never been allowed to imagine. I should have been the responsible one. Should have gently disengaged, explained why this couldn't happen. Instead, I found myself leaning forward slowly, giving him time to understand my intention, to withdraw if he wanted. His eyes widened further in understanding, then fluttered closed as our foreheads touched. We stood there, breathing each other's air, balanced on the knife edge of possibility. Outside, thunder crashed directly overhead, startling us both. The barn shuddered with its force. Isaac pulled back slightly, conflict written across his features. His hand fell away from my face. We should go down," he stammered. "Check the horses. They get nervous in storms." Reality came crashing back. What had I been thinking? This boy, this sheltered, confused boy, was trusting me not to take advantage of his awakening. And here I was, about to kiss him in a hayloft like some cliché. "Of course," I said, stepping back to create space between us. "The horses." As Isaac turned toward the ladder, conflict and longing warred within me. I knew what the right thing to do was: keep my distance, be a friend but nothing more, respect the enormous cultural gap between us. But the look in his eyes when he'd whispered, "Show me," haunted me, tugging at something profound in my chest. He hesitated at the top of the ladder, glancing back. For a moment, I thought he might say something, might retrace his steps and finish what we'd nearly started. Instead, he descended into the darkness below, leaving me alone with the sound of rain and the ghost of his touch on my skin. I remained in the hayloft, heart pounding, knowing that something irrevocable had just begun. Something that would either heal or break us both. "Show me," he whispered, raw vulnerability in every syllable. The words hung between us in the humid air, fragile and momentous. His fingertips trembled against my jaw, an innocent touch that carried the weight of transgression. Outside, the storm continued its assault on the barn, rain drumming against the wooden roof like impatient fingers. I gently caught his wrist, not to push him away, but to pause the moment, to ensure he understood what was happening between us. "Do you know what you're asking?" I said softly, searching his face in the dim light. Isaac swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing in his throat. He shook his head slowly, but his gaze didn't waver from mine. "No," he admitted, voice barely audible above the storm. "But I know it feels like something true. Something true." The simple honesty of his words struck me more powerfully than any practiced seduction ever could. Isaac hadn't been taught the language of desire, had no script to follow. All he had was the raw, unnamed feeling pulling him toward me, and the courage to acknowledge it. Lightning flashed, briefly illuminating his face, the furrowed brow, the parted lips, the silent plea in his eyes. In that split second of clarity, I made my decision. "Come here," I murmured, carefully releasing his wrist and opening my arms. For a moment he hesitated, uncertainty flickering across his features. Then he stepped forward, allowing me to draw him into an embrace that was nothing like the brief, backslapping hugs I'd seen exchanged between Amish men. This was full-bodied, intentional contact, his chest against mine, his breath warm on my neck, his hands hovering uncertainly before settling lightly at my waist. I felt him shudder, a tremor running through his tall frame. "Is this okay?" I asked, giving him every opportunity to pull away. His response was to tighten his grip slightly, fingers curling into the fabric of my shirt. "Yes," he breathed against my shoulder. I've thought about this. About being close to you like this." We stood that way for what seemed like an eternity, just holding each other while thunder rolled overhead and rain lashed the barn. I was acutely aware of every point of contact between us. The warmth of his body, the slight quickening of his breath, the way his heartbeat gradually synchronized with mine. "We should sit," I eventually suggested, reluctant to break the moment, but conscious of how exposed we were, standing in the middle of the hayloft. Isaac nodded and slowly released me. I moved to the back corner where the hay was piled highest, creating a natural cushion against the wooden wall. An old wool blanket lay folded nearby, probably left by one of the brothers during winter chores. "For the cold," Isaac explained, seeing me eye it. He picked it up, shaking off bits of straw before spreading it over the hay. We sat side by side, shoulders touching, backs against the wall. The storm was beginning to move away, thunder now a distant rumble, though rain still pattered steadily on the roof. In the semi-darkness, I could just make out Isaac's profile, the straight nose, the strong jaw still smooth compared to the full beards of the older men. "How long have you known?" I asked quietly. "That you felt different." He drew his knees up to his chest, wrapping his arms around them. "Always, maybe. But I didn't understand what it was until—" He trailed off, then continued in a lower voice. "Until I was 16, and I couldn't stop looking at Jacob Lapp when we worked together. The way the other boys talked about girls. That's how I felt when I looked at him." "What happened?" "Nothing. Jacob moved away that winter. Married a girl from another district." Isaac's voice was flat. "I prayed for God to fix me, to make me right." My heart ached for him, for the lonely struggle he'd endured without anyone to confide in, without even the language to name what he was feeling. "There's nothing wrong with you, Isaac," I said gently. "Nothing to fix." He turned to look at me then, his expression both hopeful and skeptical. "The Bible says—" "I know what some people say it says," I interrupted. "But I also know that God is love. That's what I believe anyway." Isaac was quiet for a long moment, absorbing this. Finally, he uncurled slightly, letting his shoulder press more firmly against mine. "Tell me about him," he said. "Daniel." The request surprised me. "Are you sure you want to hear about that?" He nodded. "I want to understand how it works between two men." "It works like any relationship," I said carefully. "We met at college, became friends, started dating, moved in together." "Were you happy?" I considered the question, trying to be honest not just with Isaac, but with myself. "For a while, yes, very happy, but eventually we wanted different things. He wanted to move to New York, pursue a career in finance. I wanted to finish my graduate work, focus on photography." "You fought?" "All the time, near the end. Said things we couldn't take back." Isaac was quiet again, processing. Then, hesitantly, "Did you sleep in the same bed?" The innocent question, asked with such genuine curiosity, made my chest tighten. "Yes," I said softly. "We shared a bed." He nodded, eyes downcast. After another pause, he asked, "What does it feel like to kiss another man?" My pulse quickened. "It feels right when it's with someone you care about." Isaac's gaze lifted to my mouth, then back to my eyes. The question was unspoken but clear. "Isaac," I said, voice low with warning and want. "We shouldn't." "Why not?" "Because I'm leaving at the end of summer, because your family, your community—" "Just once," he interrupted, uncharacteristically bold. "Just so I know." I should have been stronger, should have explained all the reasons why this could only lead to pain. Instead, I found myself leaning toward him, drawn by the vulnerable determination in his expression. "Are you sure?" I whispered when our faces were inches apart. In answer, he closed the distance between us, pressing his lips to mine in a kiss that was clumsy but achingly sincere. His lips were soft, slightly chapped from fieldwork, and they moved against mine with tentative curiosity. I kept perfectly still, letting him explore this new sensation at his own pace, fighting the urge to deepen the contact. After a moment, he pulled back slightly, eyes questioning. "Was that right?" I couldn't help but smile. "There's no wrong way to kiss someone, Isaac." "Show me how you would do it," he said. This time, I took the lead, cupping his face gently between my hands. I brushed my thumb across his cheekbone, feeling the warmth of his skin, the slight prickle of evening stubble. His eyes fluttered closed as I leaned in, and I pressed my lips to his with more purpose than before, still gentle but less hesitant. He made a small sound in the back of his throat, surprise or pleasure, I couldn't tell, and his hands came up to grip my forearms. I moved my lips against his, showing him without words how to deepen the kiss, how to find the rhythm of give and take. When we finally broke apart, we were both breathing harder. Isaac's eyes remained closed for a moment longer, as if he was committing the sensation to memory. "Oh," he said simply when he opened them again. That single syllable contained so much, wonder, realization, desire, fear, that it nearly undid me. I rested my forehead against his, our breaths mingling in the scant space between us. "We should stop," I murmured, even as my body argued otherwise. Isaac nodded reluctantly. "I know." Neither of us moved away. Outside, the storm had passed, leaving behind the steady drip of water from the eaves and the occasional distant rumble of thunder. The loft was peaceful, isolated from the world beyond. A sanctuary where, just for tonight, different rules might apply. Isaac shifted to sit more comfortably, wincing slightly. "Back hurts?" I asked. "Always," he admitted with a small smile. "Field work." "Lie down," I suggested, patting the blanket-covered hay beside me. "It'll help." He hesitated only briefly before stretching out on his back, hands folded across his stomach in a posture that reminded me of paintings of medieval knights on tombs. I lay down beside him, close but not touching, mirroring his position. Above us, the rafters creaked gently as the barn settled. Through a small gap in the roof, I could see a patch of night sky, stars emerging as the storm clouds dissipated. "My father wants me to be baptized this fall," Isaac said suddenly. To join the church officially. The implications were clear. Baptism would mean a formal commitment to Amish life, to its rules and restrictions. Is that what you want? His silence was answer enough. I don't know what I want, he finally said. Or I do, but it's not possible. I turned my head to look at him. In profile, his face was solemn, troubled. What do you want, Isaac? He continued staring upward. To see the ocean, to take photographs like you do, to understand how the world works beyond Lancaster County. A pause, then, almost inaudibly. To be with someone who makes me feel the way you do. My throat tightened. Isaac, I know it's foolish, he interrupted. You're leaving. I'm staying. That's how it has to be. It doesn't have to be that way, I said, the words escaping before I could consider their consequences. You could leave too. He turned to face me then, our faces inches apart on the makeshift bed. And go where? Do what? I have no education past 8th grade, no money, no skills that matter out there. You're smart. You could learn. There are communities that help people who leave the Amish. Hope flickered across his wheat, quickly replaced by doubt. My family would be shunned if I left without being baptized. They'd bear that shame. And if you stay, get baptized, marry some girl from a neighboring farm, have children, live a lie? The harshness of my words surprised us both. Isaac flinched slightly. I'm sorry, I said immediately. That wasn't fair. No, he said quietly. It was honest. We lay in silence for a long while after that, the weight of impossible choices settling over us like dust. Eventually, whether by accident or intention, Isaac's hand found mine in the darkness. Our fingers interlaced, his palm warm against mine. Will you hold me? He asked, voice small and uncertain. Just for tonight? In answer, I shifted onto my side and drew him against me, his back to my chest, my arm draped over his waist. He was tense at first, unused to such intimate contact, but gradually relaxed as I held him. Is this okay? I murmured, my lips close to his ear. He nodded, pulling my arm tighter around him. Yes. We lay that way as night deepened, neither of us sleeping, both acutely aware of each breath, each subtle movement. Occasionally, Isaac would ask a question about my life in Boston, about relationships between men, about places I'd traveled, and I would answer in hushed tones, as if normal volume might shatter the fragile bubble we'd created. What's the furthest you've been from home? He asked at one point. Italy, I replied, for a photography workshop last year. What was it like? Beautiful, ancient. Everything smelled like herbs and ocean and history. I felt him smile. That doesn't make sense. You'd understand if you were there, I said, tightening my arm around him slightly. I wish I could see it, he murmured. With you. The simple statement, so full of impossible longing, made my chest ache. I pressed my face into his hair, breathing in the scent of hay and clean sweat and something uniquely him. I wish that too, I whispered. Eventually, the quality of darkness changed, hinting at approaching dawn. We both sensed it, the imminent end of our stolen night. I should go back to the house, Isaac said reluctantly. Before anyone wakes. I know. Neither of us moved. Thomas? Yes? He turned in my arms to face me, his expression serious in the dim light. I've never felt like this before. Like I'm fully awake for the first time. I brushed a strand of hair from his forehead. I know exactly what you mean. And I did. Despite my greater experience, despite having loved before, there was something about Isaac's earnest vulnerability that cut through all my carefully constructed defenses. What was happening between us felt elemental, unfiltered by the irony and cynicism that had characterized my relationship with Daniel. Isaac leaned forward and kissed me again, more confidently this time, with a sweetness that made my heart stutter. I responded in kind, keeping the contact gentle, letting him set the pace. His hand came up to cradle my jaw, mimicking how I'd held him earlier. When we broke apart, his eyes remained closed for a moment, as if in prayer or meditation. When he opened them, there was a clarity there that hadn't been present before. "I should go," he repeated, but made no move to leave. Instead, he nestled closer, tucking his head beneath my chin. I held him, feeling the steady beat of his heart against mine, knowing that this moment, this night, would need to sustain us through whatever came next. As the first gray light of dawn seeped through the barn's wooden slats, we finally disentangled ourselves, reluctant but resigned. Isaac sat up, hay clinging to his clothes and hair. I reached out to brush it away, letting my fingers linger against his cheek. "I'll go first," he said. "Wait a few minutes before you follow." I nodded, understanding the necessity of caution. Before he descended the ladder, he turned back, a question in his eyes that he seemed afraid to voice. "Tonight?" I offered quietly. "After dinner?" Relief and anticipation flooded his face. "Yes," he whispered. "The old maple by the creek, 9 o'clock." Then he was gone, footsteps light on the ladder rungs. I lay back on the blanket, staring up at the rafters, my body still warm from his, my mind racing with possibilities and fears. Breakfast that morning was an exercise in restraint. I sat at my usual place, exhausted from our sleepless night, but hyper-aware of Isaac across the table. He kept his eyes lowered, responding only when directly addressed by his father or brothers. To anyone else, he appeared the same as always, quiet, dutiful, reserved. But I noticed the slight flush that crept up his neck when our hands brushed as he passed the breadbasket. I saw how he bit his lower lip, the same lip I had kissed hours before when he thought no one was looking. Once, when his mother turned to speak with his sister, his eyes flicked up to meet mine, and the naked emotion there nearly took my breath away. "You look tired, Thomas," Sarah Yoder commented, her keen eyes missing nothing. "Did the storm keep you awake?" "Yes, ma'am," I replied truthfully. "The thunder was quite loud in the Dottie house." "Isaac was restless too," she said, glancing at her youngest son. "I heard him moving about before dawn." Isaac stilled, fork paused halfway to his mouth. "I was checking on the new calf," he said without looking up. "Wanted to make sure the storm hadn't frightened her." Eli Yoder studied his son for a moment before returning to his breakfast. "You'll work with Samuel today," he said. "The northeast field needs clearing after those winds." "Yes, Father." I was assigned to help Abram repair fencing damaged by the storm. The work capacity kept me far from where Isaac and Samuel labored, though occasionally I caught glimpses of his tall figure in the distance, bent over fallen branches. The day passed with excruciating slowness. My body moved through the motions of work, hammering nails, stretching wire, digging post holes, while my mind remained in the hayloft, reliving each touch, each whispered word. More than once, Abram had to repeat instructions when I drifted into distraction. "City life makes men's minds soft," he commented, not unkindly. "Too many thoughts, not enough doing." I nodded, accepting the gentle rebuke. "You're right. I'm sorry." By dinner, my arms ached from labor, and my eyes burned with fatigue, but anticipation hummed beneath my skin like electricity. 9 o'clock seemed impossibly distant. The meal was typical Amish fare: roast chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans from the garden, fresh bread. I ate mechanically, barely tasting anything. Isaac sat silent as usual, though I noticed he ate little, pushing food around his plate more than consuming it. After the meal, as the family gathered in the sitting room, I excused myself, claiming fatigue and work to do on my documentation project. No one questioned my departure. The Yoders respected privacy and had never intruded on my evening solitude in the Dottie house. Back in my small dwelling, I paced restlessly, watching the light fade from the sky. At 8:30, I slipped out, camera bag over my shoulder as a pretext should anyone see me. The path to the creek took me behind the barn and through a small apple orchard, hidden from the main house by a gentle rise in the land. The old maple tree stood sentinel at a bend in the creek, its massive trunk and spreading branches creating a natural shelter. In the gathering dusk, it looked ancient and wise, as if it had witnessed countless secret meetings over its long life. I arrived early and waited, listening to the water's gentle babble and the evening calls of birds settling for the night. Fireflies began to appear, their tiny lights blinking on and off like earthbound stars. At precisely 9, I heard footsteps approaching, cautious, measured. Isaac emerged from the orchard path, silhouetted against the last orange glow of sunset. He hesitated when he saw me, as if suddenly unsure, then continued forward with determination. "You came," he said when he reached me, the simple statement filled with relief. "Of course," I replied. "Did you think I wouldn't?" He shrugged, looking down at his feet. "I thought, maybe in daylight, you'd regret what happened." I stepped closer, lifting his chin gently with my fingers until his eyes met mine. "Not for a moment." The smile that spread across his face was like sunrise, slow and transformative, lighting his features from within. Without hesitation this time, he leaned forward and pressed his lips to mine, his hands coming to rest on my shoulders. This kiss was different from those we'd shared in the hayloft, more certain, less tentative. When we broke apart, he kept his face close to mine, breath warm against my lips. "I dreamed about you," he confessed in a whisper, "last night. I didn't want to wake up." The words, spoken with such artless honesty, made my heart clench. I wrapped my arms around his waist, drawing him closer. "What happened in the dream?" I asked. A blush crept up his neck, visible even in the fading light. "We were somewhere else. A city, maybe, in a room with big windows. There was sunlight everywhere. You were showing me how to use a camera. And then—" He trailed off, the blush deepening. "And then?" I prompted gently. "You kissed me. Like last night, but more." His eyes dropped to my mouth, then back up. I woke up feeling like I was burning from the inside out. He finished in a rush, as if the words had been bottled up all day. "Like I'd die if I couldn't see you again." The raw emotion in his voice undid me. I kissed him again, more deeply this time, one hand sliding up to cup the back of his neck. He responded with an eagerness that belied his inexperience, pressing against me as if trying to eliminate any space between us. When we finally came up for air, both breathing hard, I rested my forehead against his. "We should be careful," I murmured. "This isn't safe for you." "I don't care," he said fiercely, hands fisting in my shirt. "For once in my life, I don't care about being careful." We sank down together at the base of the maple, its massive roots creating a natural alcove. Isaac sat between my legs, his back to my chest, my arms wrapped around him. The position echoed how we'd lain in the hayloft, but this time under open sky, with stars beginning to appear above us. For a while, we simply existed in the moment, his weight against me, my chin resting on his shoulder, our breaths synchronizing. The creek bubbled nearby, a continuous soothing murmur. "Tell me about the ocean again," Isaac said eventually. "I want to hear everything." So I described the Atlantic coastline near my childhood home. The rocky beaches, the salt spray, the endless rhythm of waves breaking against shore. I told him about sailing with my father, about summer storms seen from land, about the different blues of deep water and shallows. "I want to see it someday," he said, voice wistful. "I want to see everything." I tightened my arms around him, wanting to promise that he would, that I would show him all the wonders beyond Lancaster County. But we both knew the fragility of such promises. "Isaac," I began, unsure how to voice the question that had been circling my mind all day. "What happens when summer ends?" He tensed slightly in my arms. "Don't," he said softly. "Not tonight." I understood his reluctance. To speak of the future was to acknowledge its impossibility, to confront choices with no good outcomes. "Okay," I conceded, pressing a kiss to his temple. "Not tonight." We stayed by the creek until the moon rose, talking in hushed voices about everything and nothing. Isaac asked about my photographs, about Boston, about what it was like to live in a world of constant noise and light. I asked about his childhood, about Amish customs I still didn't understand, about his dreams before he knew they were forbidden. When the moon was high overhead, casting silver light across the water, Isaac turned in my arms to face me. In the ethereal glow, his features were both softened and sharpened, eyes darker, cheekbones more pronounced. "I should go back," he said reluctantly, "before someone notices I'm gone." "I know." He leaned forward, catching my lower lip between his in a kiss that started gentle but quickly deepened. His hands came up to frame my face, thumbs stroking my cheekbones with wonder, as if he couldn't quite believe I was real. I let him explore, responding to his increasing confidence with carefully controlled passion. When his lips parted against mine, an invitation I hadn't expected, I gently introduced him to deeper intimacy, drawing a soft gasp from his throat. The sound brought me back to reality, to the fact that we were outside, exposed, risking everything with every passing minute. Reluctantly, I broke the kiss, keeping my hands on his shoulders to maintain contact. "Tomorrow?" he asked, breathless and hopeful. "Tomorrow," I agreed. "Same time." He nodded, getting to his feet and offering a hand to help me up. We stood facing each other in the moonlight, reluctant to part. "Dream of me again," I said softly. His smile was shy but radiant. "I will." With one last quick kiss, he turned and disappeared down the path toward the farmhouse, his footsteps fading into the night. I remained by the creek for a while longer, touching my lips where his had been, trying to process the enormity of what was happening between us and what it might cost us both. The next week passed in a blur of secret meetings and stolen moments. During the day, we maintained careful distance, speaking only when necessary, avoiding eye contact at meals. But each night, we met at the maple tree, spending hours talking, touching, discovering each other with increasing boldness. Under the shelter of darkness, Isaac blossomed. Away from his family's watchful eyes, he was curious, articulate, hungry for knowledge about the world beyond his experience. He asked endless questions about my life, about college, about photography, about cities I'd visited, and increasingly, about what it meant to be gay in that world. "Are there others like us?" he asked one night as we lay side by side on the bank, watching stars reflected in the creek. "Many others?" "Millions," I told him. "In every country, every culture. Some places are more accepting than others, but we're everywhere." He absorbed this with wonder. "And they live openly, men with men, women with women. Many do, yes. They have relationships, share homes, get married in some places." "Married," he repeated, testing the word. "I never imagined." I turned to face him, propping myself on one elbow. "What did you imagine for yourself? Before this summer?" He was quiet for a long moment. "Nothing clearly. Just what everyone does. Baptism, finding a wife, children, working the farm until I'm too old, then watching my sons work it. Is that what you want?" His eyes met mine in the darkness. "Not anymore." The simple declaration hung between us, weighted with implications neither of us was ready to fully explore. Each night when we parted, the goodbye became more difficult. Each night our kisses grew more urgent, our touches more intimate. We were careful, always careful. But the boundaries between us were gradually dissolving, like salt in water. On the 7th night, rain kept us from our meeting place by the creek. The disappointment was physical, an ache beneath my ribs as I paced the confined space of the Dottie house, listening to water drum against the roof. Just before 10 o'clock, a soft knock at my door startled me. I opened it to find Isaac standing in the downpour, already soaked to the skin, water streaming from his hatless hair. "Isaac!" I hissed, pulling him inside and quickly closing the door. "What are you doing here? It's too dangerous." "I had to see you," he said simply, water dripping onto the wooden floor. I couldn't not see you." He looked wild, desperate, nothing like the contained young man who sat silently at the family table. I grabbed the towel from my wash basin and began drying his hair, concern warring with the joy of his unexpected presence. "If someone saw you coming here..." No one saw, he interrupted. Everyone's asleep. I was careful. I wanted to argue further, to impress upon him the risk he'd taken, but the words died in my throat as he stepped closer, eliminating the space between us. His clothes were cold and wet against mine, but his mouth was warm when he pressed it to my neck. Isaac, I breathed, half warning, half plea. Show me more, he whispered against my skin. The things you told me about. The ways men can be together. My heart hammered against my ribs. Over the past week, our conversations had become increasingly intimate. I'd explained physical relationships between men, answering his questions honestly but carefully, always conscious of his inexperience. We shouldn't, I said, even as my hands betrayed me by sliding under his wet shirt, feeling the warm skin beneath. Not here, not like this. He pulled back slightly to look at me, eyes dark with determination. Then when? Where? Summer's half over, Thomas. You'll be gone soon, and I'll never... His voice broke. I'll never know what it could have been like. With you. The raw emotion in his voice undid my resolve. I knew he was right. Our time was limited, the future uncertain. And despite all my good intentions, I wanted him with an intensity that frightened me. Are you sure? I asked, searching his face for any hesitation. Absolutely sure. In answer, he began unbuttoning his soaked shirt, hands steady despite the enormity of the moment. He slipped it off his shoulders, letting it fall to the floor with a wet slap. In the lamplight, his torso was a study in contrasts. Milk pale where clothing had protected it from the sun, golden tan at the neck and forearms. Lean muscle moved beneath the skin as he reached for me, a testament to years of physical labor. I'm sure, he said quietly. I extinguished the lamp, plunging the Dottie house into darkness, broken only by occasional flashes of lightning through the single window. In the concealing shadows, I allowed myself to touch him as I'd wanted to for weeks. Fingers tracing the contours of his chest, his shoulders, the sensitive hollow at the base of his throat. He shivered under my exploration, breath catching when I found particularly responsive places. His own hands were less certain but eager, pulling at my shirt until I helped him remove it, bringing our bare chests together for the first time. Oh, he breathed, the simple syllable expressing volumes. What followed was a slow, tender unraveling of clothing, of inhibition, of the careful boundaries we'd maintained. Each new intimacy was preceded by whispered questions, by explicit consent. I guided him gently, letting him set the pace, showing him with hands and lips how two bodies could communicate without words. When finally we lay together on my narrow bed, skin to skin under the homemade quilt, the storm outside seemed to mirror the one within us. Building, cresting, eventually subsiding into gentle rumbles of contentment. I didn't know, Isaac murmured afterward, his head resting on my chest, my fingers combing through his damp hair. I didn't know it could be like that. I pressed a kiss to his forehead, overwhelmed by tenderness and an emotion I wasn't ready to name. It's not always, I admitted. Only when there's connection. Real connection. He was quiet for a moment, tracing patterns on my skin with his fingertips. Is that what we have? Yeah, I said simply, because it was true. Whatever was between us, this fragile, impossible thing, was more authentic than anything I'd experienced before. We lay together in comfortable silence, listening to the rain gradually ease. Isaac's breathing deepened, and I realized he was falling asleep, exhausted from the day's labor and our recent exertions. I should have woken him, sent him back to the safety of the farmhouse, but I couldn't bear to disturb his peace. Instead, I adjusted the quilt around us and allowed myself to drift off as well, his warm weight anchoring me to the moment. I woke suddenly hours later, unsure what had disturbed me. Dawn was still some time away, darkness pressed against the window. Then I heard it, footsteps on the porch, followed by a soft knock at the door. Beside me, Isaac startled awake, immediately alert. Fear flashed across his features as he registered where he was, who might be outside. Thomas? A woman's voice called softly. Sarah Yoder. Is Isaac with you? His bed is empty. Isaac froze, panic evident in every line of his body. I squeezed his hand once, trying to convey reassurance, then slipped from the bed and pulled on my pants. "One moment, Mrs. Yoder," I called, voice remarkably steady given the circumstances. I lit the lamp, keeping it dim, and moved to the door. Isaac was already frantically gathering his clothes, face pale with terror. Before opening the door, I pressed a finger to my lips, then pointed to the small space behind it, the only possible hiding place in the sparse room. Isaac nodded, clutching his bundled clothes to his chest as he pressed himself into the corner. I took a deep breath, smoothed my hair, and opened the door just wide enough to see Sarah Yoder's concerned face. "I'm sorry to disturb you so early," she said, her eyes taking in my state of undress with a flicker of embarrassment. "Isaac is missing from his bed, and there's a storm. I thought perhaps—" "I haven't seen him since dinner," I lied, hating the deception but seeing no alternative. "Perhaps he's in the barn, checking on the animals?" She nodded, though doubt lingered in her expression. "Perhaps. I'll look there next." "I'm sorry to have wakened you." "It's no trouble at all," I assured her. "I hope you find him soon." As she turned to leave, a floorboard creaked behind me. The oldest board in the Dottie house, the one I'd learned to avoid when moving around at night. Sarah paused, her head tilting slightly. "What was that?" she asked. "Just the building settling," I said quickly. "It makes all sorts of noises, especially after rain." She nodded again, but her eyes had narrowed slightly. "Good night then, Thomas." "Good night, Mrs. Yoder." I closed the door and leaned against it, heart pounding. Isaac emerged from his hiding place, face ashen. "She knows," he whispered, voice tight with panic. "She suspects something." "We don't know that," I said, trying to project calm I didn't feel. "She was just worried about you." Isaac shook his head, pulling on his clothes with trembling hands. "You don't understand. My mother sees everything, knows everything. She's been watching us, I think. The way we don't look at each other at meals. The way I disappear every night.